It's official, guys. The Fed has raised their interest rates by 75 basis points today. Today is Wednesday, June 15th, as I'm shooting this video. In this article from CNBC, they basically quoted them saying that their number one goal now is to get inflation down to 2%, okay? And that's pretty much at all costs. We're talking at the expense of the real estate market, we're talking at the expense of the stock market and any other sector of the economy that may potentially experience negative side effects from these interest rate hikes. So the good thing is they seem to be committed on raising those rates and getting inflation under control, because if inflation keeps spiraling out of control, that's going to cause so many more massive problems in our economy than we have right now. So that's why inflation needs to be the number one objective. But they did say, interestingly enough, that they used to think that they'd be able to perform these interest rate hikes and basically, give the economy a soft landing. They didn't say that this time. You know why? Because they know it's not possible, guys. There's no way that them increasing these interest rates time and time again, now and throughout the rest of the year, isn't going to hurt our economy. It is. It already is hurting the economy, okay? We just saw yesterday Redfin and Compass, big real estate companies, big players in the real estate business, laid off a ton of employees. Redfin alone laid off something like 400 something employees. I'm not sure how many Compass laid off. But, those companies are experiencing significant downturns in their stock price right now. And they're basically just sending their employees a letter saying, your position's been terminated. Thanks for everything. Now, I will say that they're giving these people base pay. They're giving them like a 10-week salary in a lot of instances. So that's good. It's good that they're not just kicking people out on the street and, leaving them high and dry. So that's a good thing. Those guys hopefully will be able to find a new job. But here's the thing, guys. We're seeing more and more of these layoffs happening right now. And it's now starting to bleed into the real estate business. First, it just started off with tech companies. And you could argue that Redfin is sort of a tech company. They collect a lot of real estate data for all of us to use and see. And, so they're kind of like a hybrid of a tech company and a real estate company. But these guys are now hurting because they believe that demand for housing is going to be down for the foreseeable future. Not just for a few months, maybe for a few years. Now, why would a big company like Redfin think that? Well, because mortgages are becoming basically unaffordable. And another thing is that, people aren't going to be able to afford these mortgages, let alone when we're seeing more and more of these layoffs happening with the looming recession. Who's going to be buying houses, guys? People are going to be worried about keeping the roof over their head that they already have, let alone, buying another house. It's just not in the cards for many people right now to be looking at buying a house in this inflationary environment. It doesn't make sense for anyone. And as you can see, I'm walking through a different part of the city today. I'm here in North Beach in my neighborhood, and they're doing a bunch of work here in this area. You can see they're clearing some trees over there. This bank behind me is going to be leveled in the next couple of years, and this whole neighborhood is going to be basically transformed into something like Lincoln Road. If you've ever been to South Beach, that's kind of the end goal, is to have this whole area right over here similar to Lincoln Road. So we'll see if that ends up happening. They've been saying that for years, and so far nothing's happened, but we're seeing little changes here and there. So hopefully we'll see that. Now, by the way, guys, any of the stories that I'm going to mention in today's video, I'll have links for down in the description. Some of you are asking me in my last video, where am I getting all this information from? So I will put links to some of these stories, but keep in mind that I do quote some stories in some of these videos, but I also just use my own observations as well. So not every single little thing I say in the video needs to be quoted from some other source. Sometimes the source is me. So I will have articles in the description below based on some of the things I'm discussing here. Now, speaking of inflation, here's something else. People who bought a home in the last couple of years could still be hurt by inflation even after they already bought the home. So they already had to pay a record high price for the home. And one of the ways they're going to be hurt is the upcoming property tax hikes. A lot of municipalities are going to be reassessing assessed values on these properties, and people are going to be getting larger and larger property tax bills that a lot of folks might not even be ready for. And as you might be able to imagine, in a recessionary time and an inflationary time, a higher property tax bill is the last thing that anybody needs. So that's the first thing. The second thing is homeowners insurance. Anybody who bought a home recently and has a homeowner insurance policy, the amount that you're covered for doesn't adjust with inflation, guys. So let's just do a quick example. You know, if you have $100,000 in homeowner insurance coverage, in case of a total loss, some kind of disaster, whatever. But inflation keeps rising and rising as it has been. You know, that amount that you're going to get in the event of a claim is still only going to be that $100,000 maximum, right? That's the maximum they might pay you. Oftentimes the insurance company is always going to try to pay you way less than what you actually deserve, because that's how they make their money. But say they even give you the $100,000, that's not even good enough anymore, because inflation is killing everything, including the cost of goods and services. So if you need to rebuild your home, or there's a ton of damages from, say, flooding or, you know, a hurricane like we have here in Florida, something like that, that money is not going to be enough to repair your home. And this hits you on two fronts, because you could say, all right, well, Michael, you can just take a look then, reassess, and raise the amount of policy that you're covered for. Okay, go ahead and see how much that's going to cost you. Especially here in Florida, guys. There's some situations now where people are paying more in property insurance here in Florida than they're paying in property taxes. That's how crazy insurance is getting down here anyways. And it's something that a lot of people aren't aware of when it comes to just how much inflation can mess with your insurance coverage. So that's another way that inflation is hurting recent buyers. And the last thing is capital gains taxes. Now let's say you bought a home, a couple of years ago for $200,000, and now you want to turn around and sell it for $500,000, because now you can get $500,000 in your area. All right, great, go ahead. But what happens then? You're going to get taxed capital gains taxes, because the government only gives you, as a single person, $250,000 exemption and $500,000 if you're married. In the event you've gained a lot of equity in your property recently and you want to go sell it, you're going to be paying additional capital gains taxes on that sale, because the exemptions for primary residences haven't changed since, I believe, the 90s. Those numbers were put in place back sometime in the late 90s, guys. So obviously you can see a lot of these things, like the tax code, the tax credits that the government's willing to give you, is not keeping up with how far inflation is out of control right now. So that could be a big problem for people when it comes to selling their home and insuring their home. Another story that I kind of touched on real briefly in my last video was how a lot of these big institutional investment firms are sitting on the sidelines with cash, waiting for home prices to come down, and they're ready to swoop in and buy a lot of these homes when the prices start coming down. And this is not just me saying this, guys. I have a confirmed story here right from American Homes for Rent CEO David Singlin. He said his company is taking calls daily, right, from potential sellers that include national builders, and they're offering concessions on deals even as they refuse to lower prices, although he anticipates reductions in the future. Because like I said last time, some of these builders are out of money and the buyers have basically disappeared at this point. And so who's left? You have these cash investors ready to buy up these big swaths of homes and turn them into rentals. So this is terrible for the US housing market, This is basically, if you ask me, a crime against the American people at this point. We're having a housing crisis in this country to the likes of which we've never seen before, and yet this is still allowed to happen? It shouldn't be, guys. I did a whole dedicated video on this a few months ago, but I'll say it again. I don't think this should be legal, okay? The government needs to step in and stop these companies from being allowed to purchase all these homes and turn them into rentals, because this is not sustainable for our economy, and it's not sustainable for the future of American home ownership. Now here's the next thing. Luxury sales are down, okay? Down almost 18% nationwide. Luxury home sales we're talking about. And why do you think that is, guys? You know, if you look at the mentality and the situation where who can purchase a luxury house? Only someone who's rich, right? So if someone who's rich doesn't have an optimistic view on our economy and where things are headed, then why should we as normal people? You know, one thing I will say is that I'm an optimistic person by nature. I always hope that no matter how bad things get right now, that eventually it's going to get better, just like it did during the last downturn. I think this could end up being worse than the last downturn in some ways, and it could take longer to recover, because last time we didn't have this inflation that was running out of control, and that seems to be our biggest problem overall, which affects all of the markets. So that's the biggest issue. But basically how I look at this as just a regular average Joe is, if people who are wealthy are being cautious with their money right now, then you should probably be doing the same. I know that I am. I'm not going to be spending money on a bunch of things I don't need right now. I'm not going to be going into credit card debt. I'm not going to be doing anything like that. In fact, I'm doing exactly the opposite. I'm just not buying anything I don't really need right now, and I'm saving as much money as I can for when the crash comes, because I think there's going to be deals out there to be had on all kinds of things. There's already deals to be had in the stock market, and there's definitely going to be deals to be had in the real estate market, and that's one of my favorite types of investments. So I'm just going to be waiting that out and saving for that, because it's going to happen, guys. It's already happening right now before our eyes. It's just very early stages, and I think when you see people with a lot of money starting to tighten the belt as well, then that's a pretty early indicator of what's to come. So we need to pay attention to that. Here in Miami Beach, we got these city bikes stations where people can just come and rent these bikes. Not a single one here today. I guess I'm walking. Now, a couple of interesting stories right here out of Florida is the first one right here in Miami where I live. There's this situation with this famous houseboat that you may have seen on Netflix apparently, and I saw it before being featured as one of these amazing, basically luxurious houseboats. And they have it parked down by Star Island in Miami Beach, and if you've been in that area, there's a good chance you might have seen it. And I'll put up a picture of it so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. It's basically this luxury houseboat that has these big 4 pillars on each corner, so that way it can kind of anchor into the bay and stay put kind of like a real house. And Miami-Dade County is literally trying to assess property taxes on this houseboat because they're claiming that this is actually a piece of real estate and that they're owed property taxes on it. And the funny thing is, the owner of this houseboat has fought back against the county and has won in court and has basically avoided paying over $120,000 in potential real estate taxes to Miami-Dade County. So a couple of things I want to mention about this is, first of all, if you are looking for a way to save money during the recession, then live on a boat, guys, because anybody who lives on a boat in Miami-Dade County, at least down here, I don't know how it works in the rest of the world or anywhere else in the country, but you can park your boat here in Biscayne Bay for free, okay, and live on your boat. People do this all the time. You can drive by any part of the bay and look out and see a bunch of boats sitting out there in the bay that basically never move. And those guys don't pay rent and they don't pay property taxes, which arguably are the biggest expenses that most Americans are facing right now. So that's one of the things that you got to pay attention to. If you're really looking to save money and you want to find a cheap way to live, maybe you should look at living on a boat. But I'm glad that the owner of this property won that case, because he was able to basically prove in court that, hey, this is not a house, this is a real marine vessel. It has all of the licenses and permits and flotation devices and whatever else you need to basically be officially called a boat. It has all these things, and you can't tax me as a piece of real estate, because this thing can actually be picked up and moved anytime I want to. So that's definitely justice being served right there, if you ask me. The next interesting Florida real estate story is just how many cities across Florida now have crossed this threshold where the home values are no longer attached to the local wages. And my friend Nick over at Reventure Consulting talks about this in a lot of his videos, so I want to thank him for bringing attention to this important dynamic in the housing market, because if we have all these housing markets that are going beyond what the locals can actually afford, how does anybody think that those home prices can continue to go up? There's no way that those home prices can continue to go up without outside interference, meaning like people coming in from more expensive areas, remote workers that have California salaries living in Florida, or New York salaries living in Florida, or if we have a ton of foreign investors like we have here in Miami and I covered recently. I used to think for a while that Miami would be safe, relatively speaking, from the next downturn here, because so many homes here were purchased with cash, and I don't think we're going to see the level of crash where home prices come down here 50% like they did during the last downturn. But now I'm not so sure, because Miami's on this list of places. You have Cape Coral, you have Miami, they have Melbourne, Florida, there's Port St. Lucie, Florida, there's Naples, Florida, all on this list of places that the wages are no longer attached to the average price of a home. So think about that for a minute. Now, I've said this in some of my past housing market videos, that I do think there's going to be some sort of housing market crash or correction. And there's a lot of people out there who think that there's no way home prices can come down because of this supply and demand dynamic. And yes, I will agree that supply is the biggest issue and hurdle that the housing market faces right now when it comes to affordability. But guess what, guys? With all these layoffs that are happening and just how fast this recession is coming on, I don't see that being an issue for much longer, because as these layoffs continue to come in and more people lose their jobs, they're not going to be able to pay their mortgages, and that's going to fix the supply problem real quick. And I hate saying it in the sense like, all these people are going to lose their homes, or have to short sell or sell before they lose their home, but that's just the reality. That's the world that we live in, okay? So there are going to be buying opportunities in the near future. The only universe where I see there being no downturn in the housing market is if somehow miraculously everybody out there is able to stay afloat with record high inflation, and they can turn around and find a new job that pays just as much or more than their old job and keep surviving with no gap in their income. So that's a fantasy, I think, not very close to reality. So I still hold my case. I still think that home values are going to continue to go down. We're seeing price cuts in many markets, and I feel like those price cuts are just going to continue to happen as the year goes on. And especially now that we have the Fed saying that all they care about basically at this point is getting inflation to near the 2% number. So how many times do you think they're going to have to raise their rates in order to get that to happen, guys? It's going to be a while. So that means it's going to be a bumpy ride. It means there's going to be more price cuts, and it means there's going to be less people who can afford a mortgage, because these 30-year mortgage rates are just going to continue to go up. I made a prediction in an earlier video that I think 30-year mortgages could hit 7 to 8% by the end of this year, and they're already over 6%, and it's only June. And we still have more interest rate hikes to come this year, and they already said that they plan to have the base interest rate around 3.8% by the first quarter of 2023. So if you think that interest rates are going to stay at 6%, guys, you're kidding yourself. It's not going to happen, okay? And that's the case that a lot of real estate agents will tell you, oh, this is why you should buy right now, because home prices are going to continue to go up and interest rates are going to continue to go up as well. And if you don't buy now, you're never going to be able to afford to buy. It's just not true, guys. It's a big fat lie that they tell you in order to get you to buy a home, because that's how they make their money. I know, I'm in the real estate business. I've dealt with many different agents, and I feel like there's two different types of agents out there. You have real estate agents who are honest and really care about their clients and don't want to see them get hurt financially and will give them good advice, okay? And there's other ones that don't care about their clients at all and will just say anything to make the sale. They'll steal other agents' clients. They'll, do any kind of underhanded tactic they can do to make the sale, which obviously is wrong. It's not ethical or moral, but there's people out there like that, and you need to be careful. I think those are the type of people you have to look out for right now. But of course, do the best thing that you think is for your family. If you find a good deal out there today, which is still possible, I'm a firm believer that you could still find a good deal somewhere in the country. There are still places where you can buy that will be cheaper than renting, and if that's the case, go for it. If you think that that's the best decision for you, who am I or anybody else to say that that's not the right decision, guys? Okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, if you stuck with me this long, that means you probably really enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel and check out my next video on the screen right over here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.